Welcome to the Occupational Safety Leadership Podcast, episode number 29, Safety Hazards of 3D Printing. In today's episode, we'll do a very brief introduction on the hazards of 3D printing out there. These are super popular. You'll find them all over schools, homes. The industrial place has, of course, from desktop models to giant floor size. Um, they're just more and more prevalent out there. For the most part, of course, they're extremely safe and everything, but that doesn't mean that there's not a uptick in hazards. Uh, I'm sorry, there's not an uptick in injuries. There also doesn't mean that it's not expelling fumes and other things that we're now starting to see with all this time that now it's not as safe as we thought. We're also using all kinds of different plastics, so we're kind of focusing on the two most popular plastics. So let's go ahead there and get started. So when we think about the hazards of 3D printing, it could really be broken down into about five main categories. It doesn't mean that you don't have more, but when you think about it, so we have fumes, fire hazards, electrical, mechanical, and chemical hazards. So let's kind of sit down and break down a couple of these then. So when we think about the fumes, we're basically taking a solid. For the most part, every so often you can get this in like a liquefied plastic, of course. But what you're doing is you're heating this up, and you're taking either it goes from a solid in a strand, and you're heating it, and then you're kind of putting it onto a bead, or it's going from a liquid to a solid. So when it does this, two of the most common ones are the ABS and the PLA plastics out there then. So these are going to release fumes because, of course, they're heated. Plastic is melting, the fume is coming off, so it has to go someplace then. So recommendation is to use it in a very well ventilated area or use some kind of enclosed chamber, air filtration system, something that you're just taking the fumes away from the humans out there. When we think about a fire hazard then, so it's basically taking something that can melt, it's heating it up, and we hope that we don't have that runaway heating element then. So it will heat up to a certain temperature, melt the plastic, and then when it's over, of course, it then goes back, it cools down, goes back down to room hazards and all that. They have seen where they've had that runaway temperature excursions, out there too. So the big recommendation, of course, is to never leave it unattended, which is actually really hard. I know a lot of people that if the print job takes 20 hours, they hit start as they're at work and they know it takes 20 hours. Now, they're obviously not at work the whole time. They're obviously not, somebody is not there to watch it at all times. So, what they do is that they make the area as fire safe as they possibly can, too. They put it by a sprinkler, they put it on something that will not burn. They do everything they can to say, even if they do have that runaway temperature excursion, it's not going to spread beyond the small 3D printer area. That's right there. Um, it would be better if it never happened. We're just not at that point with technology that things like that don't happen. Electrical hazards, of course, this was one that I had never thought. One of the big things they say is don't use this printer with wet hands, of all things. Then, so, and I get it that we're going to be doing other operations. Of course, we're washing our hands in between because we're touching plastic and we're doing other things, and all that kind of stuff. Then the big thing is that they don't want you to touch this thing with wet hands. Mechanical, we have moving parts, pinch points, and things. You have doors which open and close. So these hazards can happen. For the most part, these hazards do not present a big severity, injury and all the rest. But once again, you really don't know what's going to be happening there. So we want to do everything we can mechanically to make sure that we're not getting fingers in there, that we're using it safely, and all the rest then. And then the last one, They call it a chemical hazard. At the end, when the plastic piece is done, most people will have to go back and sand these places then. So to really get off, to really make it exactly what they're looking for. And obviously, when you start sanding plastic, you're now releasing the particles, you're releasing a fume, you're making friction, of course, which is taking off that little bit of that layer on there. So now you're adding those plastic particles back to the workplace end. So the big thing is that they really want you to wear some like protective gloves and eyewear, of course. And if you have anything that's left over, of course, obviously dispose of that in a safe manner. And that is it for episode 29, Safety Hazards of 3D Printing. Nice, short, and sweet episode. Now, in the following episodes, we'll sit down and break down the chemical characteristics of the two most common plastics out there, the ABS and the PLA, since those are typically the biggest hazards that we find are going to be the fumes that we deal with out there. So we'll sit down, we'll break down those two, and just kind of help to educate people a little bit more since the hobbyist is now buying these things and putting them in their homes. Um, so we just want everybody to be as safe as they possibly can. Episode number 29 done. My name is Dr. David Ayers. Have a safe day.